Hello, everyone. My name is Kristin Snowden. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of California. And this is a webinar for all things related to personal and relationship growth and healing through sexandrelationshiphealing.com, but also through my site, Kristin Snowden. And many of you who are present or listening to this later on find these videos because you're in a state of crisis. Where maybe your life and relationships have gone painfully wrong. You really feel like life just keeps happening at you, to you, and you just really feel powerless to assert any kind of control over what's happening to you. So one of the greatest educational tools, aha moment creating pieces I share with everyone is the trauma stuff, which I just got done doing a couple webinars with you on that. So look up trauma and PTSD and the fear stress state. That will really give you some aha moments. But the other piece that is huge in unraveling all these pains and hurts and feeling like life is happening at you, and you really want to create some kind of empowerment and tools to get through the pain and transcend it to a better place, is understanding how shame shows up in your life, in your relationships, in your body, etc. Because one of the biggest mistakes I think we make as humans, and we're not really taught this at the beginning of life, we're kind of made to believe we're this one fully functioning united front entity called this person. You know, I have one name, I am one person and one belief system. But really, if you watch my webinars and you understand, you start realizing we have all these different, sometimes conflicting systems, multi-level systems in our body. From like our survival instincts, right, where we're constantly unconsciously scanning the environment, trying to figure out what's a threat to us, how to stay alive. It's very primal. As someone I heard just say the other day, it doesn't have a calendar, it doesn't have a watch. So meaning it doesn't give a crap if something bad happened 30 years ago or what day it is right now or who you are as a person. It just wants you to survive at all costs. And that's its entire system. Now, there's a little bit more complexities and multi-levels to the shame system that we have, because that is another system that completely informs and impacts who we are as a person. It gathers experiences, engagements with other people, and it starts writing stories in our head about how we need to show up as a person, what we need to not say, what we need to not do in order to engage successfully with this world and ultimately, you know, survive. These are both the trauma brain, kind of as I say it, and the shame brains are very unconscious or subconscious, and they scratching the surface of those two very subconscious processes can be very, very uncomfortable. So most of our responses, because remember, humans just innately move towards pleasure, move away from pain. When we want to go into our trauma history, when we want to go into our shame stories, our knee-jerk reaction is, that's not my problem. Why do we need to do this? Why do we need to go there? That was years ago, or that's not realistic. But I want you to understand, there's a whole part of your brain that doesn't care about those sentences that just came out of my mouth. They're recorded in my body. And if I don't, you know, Brene Brown says, if I don't understand what the story is, and I rewrite that story for myself, for my own empowerment, then that story is just going to own me and start dragging me all over the place. And so shame and trauma, if you don't understand where they came from, how they show up in your body, the story behind them, and then, as we've said in other webinars, kind of write a story of empowerment about it afterward because you've fully processed it, they will own you and they will impact your physical health, your mental, emotional well-being, and continue to rear their ugly heads in all personal relationships, professional life, etc. So I'm going to really ask you to kind of take the parts of yourself that's like, I don't have trauma, my life was great, I think I'm wonderful, what do you mean? You know, it's my it's my husband's problem, it's my part, it's this that happened to me is the problem. And I'm just going to ask you to kind of set those off to the side and explore, what if I do have shame? What if some of this is showing up? So you look like you want to say something, Tami.
So many clients that come to treatment that are like, I don't have any trauma, but it was so normalized for them. So I love that you're saying, just set that aside and let's just look at this. So I'm just engaged. So
yeah, just come from this discussion about trauma and shame with a space of curiosity, even if it's just to learn more maybe about your partner and not yourself. This is the hardest topic I teach. You could listen to podcasts and lectures on shame every day and still just barely start scratching the surface. I always joke when I talk about shame that I had to, as part of Rob's program, I had to teach this whole Brene Brown stuff, and I teach it to the clients. I conceptually understood it and I could speak it and teach it. But it wasn't until months and months and months, all in the effort of being a good therapist and a good lecturer and getting a good handle on the material for my clients so they could benefit from it. Months down the line, I was like, I think I have shame. And I think it's really effing with me. So I honor the defense mechanisms that don't want you to go here, because this is a really gross place that we're going to talk about today. But man, if you don't understand how it's showing up in your life, in relationships, and your feelings, and your body, everything, you're not going to be able to transcend out of it, because there is a shame resiliency practice. Okay, so let me give you a really quick review. There's kind of, if you can think of, there's like one huge entity, right? This human being that you're seeing right here. Hi, my name's Kristin. I have values and goals. But then I also have a whole system behind me that's like, okay, but you need to breathe, you need to eat. There's also those carnal, like you need to reproduce, you need to protect your offspring. These things that are just constantly running at all costs, and it doesn't consult with my values and who I want to be as a person. It's like its own system that's running without any kind of informing. And then we have this executive functioning brain that tries to like mix the two and kind of come as like a corporate board where we're all negotiating and compromising. So what is the survival system? So it's essentially, it's a multi-level system in our body. Like think of the autonomic nervous system, the limbic system, the amygdala. These are like our emotional parts of our brain: fear, hunger, anger, happiness, desire, urges, cravings. That is what shows up in the room first and foremost. We often say we like to think that we're these high executive functioning thinking beings, but all the science pretty much confirms over and over again, the first thing that shows up is our feelings about something. Do we like it? Do we not like it? What's bad? What's good? It's feelings. So just keep that in mind. We first and foremost quickly access the autonomic nervous system, the limbic system, the amygdala, the hypothalamus, and they're constantly scanning our environment, trying to determine the threat level. It's there. We don't want to get rid of it. It keeps us alive. It's our friend in that way, but our foe in so many other ways, because it's not 100% accurate. In fact, it's extremely inaccurate. It's automatic, it's involuntary, and it runs with very little blood flow. And the system is not concrete. So meaning we're not born with one exact input-output system. It's made to be highly adaptive. So every little thing that happens in our life, in our environment, shapes what we consider a threat. Are we going to fight something? Are we going to run away from it? Are we going to please and appease it? Are we going to freeze and kind of dissociate and disconnect and go on our phone for 6 hours to avoid it? This all trains our body to just work. It's constantly adaptive. So like a newborn baby's survival system is constantly trying to adapt and grow. Just as a side thing, I've said this before, when these multi-level survival systems aren't busy trying to keep us alive, it is running all the other automatic involuntary systems like the breathing, the heart rate, digestion, immunity responses, some sexual and sleeping responses, etc. Okay, so then imagine there's kind of the big survival system and it's constantly adaptive. And then we have two other systems that are giving very specific feedback to this huge collection of data, of like, how do I need to move about this whole world with all these different people in this world? One is the trauma system, which I won't go into extreme detail because I check out some of my webinars. You can just look me up, and it's just like trauma and PTSD, the autonomic nervous system, the stress, fear, anxiety responses in the body. But trauma is essentially a mechanism in our body that anytime our wiring gets overwhelmed, so whatever your level of getting overwhelmed is different than another person's system of getting overwhelmed. But anytime it records as like, "Ooh, this is not predictable. I'm blindsided. This is giving me fear or concern, or there's too many uncertainties, and my neurobiology feels overwhelmed, helpless, powerless, etc." It is going to record into my brain. It's going to rewire and reorganize my brain and my body and system to be like, "Ooh, hold on to this stuff. This is potentially very dangerous, and I want you to proceed with caution." So something really generic, I was trying to think of something that's very like unemotionalist, but let's say a bee sting, right? You're walking around out in the park and a bee stings you, and it's very, very painful. Or let's say even if you are allergic, and you have an allergic reaction to it, that's going to record in your body as for the rest of your life to say bees could potentially be dangerous. When you see one, flail your arms like a crazy person and run away. If you've ever been one of those people at the barbecues, right? A really strong response. Or if you've never really been stung by the bee and you're standing by a bee buzzing by you, you're going to have a very different nervous system response to it, right? So it records and says, okay, this is potentially threatening. Like I told you, your trauma survival system doesn't have a calendar. So it doesn't go, "Oh, this happened 8 years ago. Who cares?" Or, "Oh, but no, this is who you want to show up as a person. You don't want to wail your arms like a crazy person and run away in the middle of a conversation." It just responds according to the threat. And so because of the trauma response, because of the survival system, we also have a very, what we call negative bias. So good, fun, great things in life aren't going to kill us. So we don't record them and reorganize our brain system around positivity. Sadly, that's why we that's why we have so many floods of bad, negative memories, because that's just the wiring in our brain. So then there's another system. So that's the trauma system. And there's another system that's kind of tied into the trauma and like survival system, which is the shame system. These are just my words. This is my observation clinically, is how it happens. And if you remember, this goes back because we are neurobiologically wired to connect with other people. So we are innately social beings. We are not healthy, safe, living our best life when we're an island. We are born, and there's reasons. So there's a survival mechanism to that. Humans, when they're born, as I've mentioned in other lectures, we're not like a horse being born or a spider coming out of an egg or a turtle hatching on the beach, where they're just, what happens? They start walking around. Some can feed themselves. They're independent. They might not see who spawned them ever again, and they're 100% independent. That is not a human being. A human being, when we are born, newborns are like these little blobs that with like a giant head and like little whaley scrawny arms. And so we have strong neurochemicals and strong wiring in our body due to survival to have strong attachment with the other human species around us. So we have these things called oxytocin, serotonin, and these are strong wiring saying keep other humans in your life. We seek like pushing on our chest, like comfort. When a baby's crying and hurt, we have that innate drive to hold them and pull them closer. When a child is lost in the mall, they're not kind of kicking around going, "Oh, I hope I find my mom one day." No, they're in panic and they're in deep fear because losing that connection might as well be a threat to their life. Okay, so shame exists because we are a highly social being. Shame cannot happen to species who are not social. Trauma can happen to be right, because like they'll still avoid danger and run away. But if they are not wired to want to connect with other human beings and have that connection be so strong that to not have it will trigger, I'm going to die. That is what shame is about. So the couple sound bites I give you to tell you what shame is as long as we have that wiring to want to connect with other human beings, we will have a constant equal pushing force against us saying, what if you're not enough for it? So why would we have such an antagonistic, hurtful story going on in our head? There's no kind of real science to prove why we have shame, but there's a lot of like anthropologists, socialists, psychologists that have kind of said, well, okay, look, we know for a fact we're wired. We have lots of feel-good hormones that come out when we're in connection. We also know human babies can't survive without people. We have this innate drive to connect with others. We can't survive without them. And by the way, we know for a fact, we don't just need food and water from others to survive. We need physical touch. We need eye contact. We need close proximity. Those all usually create a safety system in our neurobiology saying this is good. That oxytocin comes out, the serotonin, the dopamine says this is good, keep this in our life. So why do you think we have such this dark kind of story that's like, okay, well, I want this so desperately. I want human contact, but what if I'm not good enough for it? And I kind of theorize that this world is so vulnerable. Like, I'm just this like raw, breakable being that's walking through this world. I don't have to sell it anymore about how vulnerable this world is. It's, right now it's June 2022, and we have been through so many acts that are out of our control. It's hard to get up out of bed sometimes. It's hard to have normal conversations with people sometimes. It's definitely hard to look at your phone or turn on the TV sometimes, because what is that? It's just evidence all day, every day of how much vulnerability we're experiencing. We are powerless to pandemics, to geopolitical events. And then in the micro world, we are powerless to whether or not my husband wants to stay married to me, if my teenage daughter hates me or doesn't hate me, right? These are all, I could be the best therapist I could try to be, and someone could still just not like me. You could think this lecture sucks right now. This is all out of my control. Well, guess what? The brain does not like that story. The brain seeks out predictability. I want to know, no, don't give me the, oh, it's the gray area and I could be both a good therapist and a bad therapist. It says, no, screw that. I need to feel like I can assert some kind of control in this crazy, vulnerable world. And the only thing I really have control of is this brain right here controlling this body. So guess how I'm going to try to control you? I'm going to tell you, for every bad, scary thing, that every trauma thing that happens in this world that you witnessed or you experienced, I'm going to tell you, you could have asserted some control over this. I'm going to tell you that if you were a kinder, gentler therapist, because guess what? There's a lot of history about you having harsh words, you sometimes being mean, and you bulldozing instead of being empathetic. So I'm going to record that in your brain, and I'm going to take you out to tell you, the reason why that person doesn't like you as a therapist is because you're a bad person. And you need to knock that stuff out. Because if you don't act better in this way, you're going to lose that connection with other human beings. And then remember, losing connection with human beings equals death as far as our neurobiology goes, right? It harkens back to the past. So what is shame? It is an unconscious fear of not being enough. I want this so much. What if I'm too screwed up for it? Being unworthy of love, connection, acceptance, validation, this is too broken, it needs too much, it asks for too much, it has too many feelings, it has too much trauma, it has too many reactions. And shame is all about, this is the important part about shame, is that it is a social context. So if you really want to get down to what shame looks like in your life, you go really quickly to a basic concept, which is, how do I want to be perceived by this world? So let me just quickly show this sheet, and I will have this on my website under free resources. But the really quick way to identify shame triggers, or what shame is and how it shows up in your life, is to be asking yourself these really basic questions, which is, how have I worked my whole life to be perceived? Right? These are my ideal desires, identities, and characteristics. This is how I've tried, right? That this hair, this makeup, this shirt, like this has all been about asserting something to this social context, right? All you people, about how I want to be perceived by you. These are my ideal desires and identities. My shame is in the unwanted part. How have I worked my whole life to not be perceived, right? I want to look put together. I want to look professional. I want to look like I'm competent. So I communicate in a certain way. I assert myself in a certain way. So this is a really great sheet to kind of help you start the understanding of what my shame voices are, because all of our shame voices are very different. Because remember, it's just like our trauma. It is shaped and organized around experiences we directly had, or things that we witnessed other people go through, right? I could be afraid of being considered lazy or incompetent, not because anyone ever directly said, Kristin, you're lazy or incompetent, but maybe I watched my parents or teachers make fun of lazy and incompetent people, or I watched a kid get bullied because they looked a certain way or they acted a certain way. Holy moly, that is a strong mechanism in our life to cause us to change our behavior. And, you know, Brene Brown says shame will initially change someone's behavior, right? Because they'll feel so overwhelming. It's a visceral experience. You know, Brene Brown says, if I put you in an MRI, that's like where they scan your body and brain, and I stabbed you, right? So where you feel all the feelings of pain and fear and all that. If I put you in an MRI and I stabbed you with a knife, and then I put you in an MRI and I shamed you, your body would light up in the same way. But the big difference is shame is this really deep, dark story that if it's that we think when we're experiencing it, because it's kind of back here, not in the rational part of our brain, that it was our fault, we're the problem. It's so uncomfortable that we don't even want to acknowledge that it's happening. So it's very unconscious, it's very intangible. But the other thing is we tend to not want to share it. We keep it secret. We don't want anyone to know. I was just doing a workshop the other day, and someone in the workshop was saying, her mom was saying, oh, we take all that stuff and we put it in a box and we don't talk about it, you know, because it's bad, it happened, but it's over. But all the science is showing this stuff doesn't go away. If you don't understand what the full dark story is that you were kind of telling yourself, it's going to show up in every other way that trauma shows up when it's not worked out, right? Really strong emotional responses when you don't mean to have them, passive aggression, direct aggression. Shame is at the core of addiction, right? Because it's like, I don't know how to self-soothe myself, so I'll go to my acting out behavior. And then, of course, it just feeds more. Oh, if people really knew me, what I was doing, the lies I tell, the things I do, they really wouldn't love me. And so I get stuck in this dark, dark cycle. So there is a shame resiliency practice. I'm going to maybe save that for our next webinar to talk about that. In a nutshell, though, what you really, really need to know is that as long as I'm wired to want to connect with other human beings, I'm always going to have this kind of little red flag that almost collects data all day, every day, trying to tell me that I'm not worthy of love and connection. We all have it. The only species that don't have it don't have the capacity to love and connect and feel empathy and connection with other human beings. And strangely, and similar to trauma, the only way out of the really uncomfortable experiences and hurt and pain that gets stored up and locked in our body, like trauma does, and shame does the same thing. The only way to transcend that is to really understand, kind of almost like what I was showing in this chart, which is, okay, this is how I've worked my whole life to be perceived. But then maybe this happened. Someone made fun of me, or I watched other people get made fun of, or maybe, with appearance and body image, maybe I'm getting older and I'm gaining weight. And then I'm finding that I'm writing this story that, oh no, I'm that, whatever that unwanted identity or characteristic was, how I've worked my whole life to not be perceived. Now people are going to view me as X, Y, and Z. And then before I know it, if I don't work that stuff out, and by the way, figure out the origin of that perception. Did the culture tell me this story? Where did I get the story that I need to look this way to be considered competent, smart, trustworthy, likable, someone that you want to be your friend, someone who I want to make as my friend? Where did I get these stories from? Who gave them to me? Did someone tell them directly to me? Did my mom tell me them? Did the TV programs I watched tell me them? And then the other thing that you start doing with this exercise, when you start peeling the layers about these shame stories you kind of collected through your life, is the complete madness of it all. So I think I was talking to some the workshop people about, okay, well, I want to be perceived as like emotionally stable, right? Because betrayed partners have been thrown through a loop, and they're in such a trauma, fight, flight, freeze state that they have strong reactions. They cry, they're in pain, right? But if my shame voice is that, oh, well, who could love me if I'm not emotionally stable? And I want to work really hard to not have such an emotional response. I'm just giving this as an example. I'm going to experience shame. But the truth is, these have been horrible things that have happened. Or being angry and responding that way might help you with boundary setting and consequences to your partner, that like the things you're choosing to do, the lies you're telling, the behaviors you're engaging are hurting me. And this is what it looks like when you've hurt me. And this is a normal feedback loop system that can be productive in helping the relationship change, get out of unhealthy patterns, etc. So sometimes you'll find these shame voices that kind of like tie your hands and stop you from showing up in an authentic, real, vulnerable way are completely unproductive. So the antithesis of shame, right, of this fear of what if I'm not enough, is believing like, okay, maybe what if I screwed up, or if I'm imperfect, but I'm still innately lovable, like I am valuable. I might get angry, but I still love. I might screw up, but I still love and deserve to be loved. And then there's just this like source of value, which again, that is all a deeper dive into like the therapy psychology world. But you can't even start talking about the shame or navigating through it and starting a shame resiliency practice from it without even knowing that it exists. So hopefully that exercise I provided you can help set you down the path to start kind of scratching the surface of your shame. And then next month, we'll kind of talk about the shame resiliency practices. And that's it.
Great information. And I was like, those little boxes, like you need a page,
Right.
for those.
Yes,
I just read something the other day about that society does not believe women should be angry. So when you're talking about the emotional stability, it was like over 90% of people thought that it was not okay for women to display anger. And I was like, wow, like we can't even be our authentic self. But if that is society and we were raised with that. I was thinking too, when you're talking about how you have to put all the negative in a box because it happened in the past and shove it in a closet. But I think it's like the pressure cooker that, it's always underneath the surface. It doesn't go away, and the unresolved stuff is what, turns around and bites us. And particularly for addicts, that unresolved stuff is the stuff that helps us be compartmentalized and continue to act out, because we can't deal with those emotions. That would be, unladylike, or society would not,
or I don't even have the
family
tolerance for it.
Right,
it's
right,
so uncomfortable
absolutely.
that I can't even scratch the surface for it. It's like you're asking me to run a marathon and I've not even walked a mile.
Yeah. So I think I thought it was interesting too when you were talking about the pain of like the physical pain and the trauma pain, on the MRI, like did not have a clue that lights up the brain in the exact same ways. But if like that's a very real visual of like, okay, getting stabbed and trauma is to my brain the same thing. So
yeah.
So
or even I was going to add, I meant to say this and I forgot, but really ask all of you that are listening, if I gave you the choice between breaking your arm, so a physical pain, trauma, or breaking your heart by some kind of event, what would you choose? Because the breaking the arm is the trauma part, but the breaking the heart, because it's a social exchange, that's the feeling and the fear of being disconnected, abandoned, rejected, unlovable, that stuff lasts, right? And that example, in my opinion, helps you understand trauma kind of has like a beginning, middle, and end, but shame can just stretch out forever in this like deep, dark storyline. And that's usually what makes it last beyond, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, well, it does. And, in talking to partners who are like, he left me, the addict, let's say he's the addict, she's the partner. He left me and he left me a year and a half ago. And it's like, what's wrong with me? So so the shame message is still, there's something wrong with me, even though clearly he's an addict. He's not living in the real world, but still the partner is experiencing that, unfortunately, on a deep level, when it really isn't about the partner, it really is about him. But, but she's been traumatized by it. So, okay, I will put in the chat Kristin's website too, where you can find that worksheet. But so Kristin, the first question is, as a betrayed partner, I recently recognized the trauma bond between my husband and I. He's a recovering sex and porn addict, almost a year from D-Day. I'm feeling the shame of not realizing we were trauma bonded in the beginning of our relationship. I can look back and see the red flags, but I ignored them out of desperation to connect, I think. How do I reconcile this shame and how do I work through it?
Right. This is a really great question to kind of continue on what I was going to say, which is, remember, if the shame has been wired because what happened to you was so overwhelming and so your body was so traumatized by it, its options are to either put you in the fetal position and have you never go back out and do this world again, or to write some story about it that it's your fault, that you should have known, you should have seen the scenes, you were too broke, right? And you see that your brain is kind of trying to help you, right? Because you're not gonna survive if you stay in the fetal position and just give up on humanity entirely. So it kind of picks the lesser of two evils, but you still see that shame story that it's had you right in your head, that you should have known that you had an unhealthy pattern of engaging with your partner. And we have a hard time with the whole betrayal bond because that can sound a little blaming and shaming, but let's just say retrospectively you could see that you missed opportunities to hold boundaries. Maybe you struggled with identifying what was going on inside you and communicating it. Maybe he was doing the same thing. But see, what I'm saying right now to you is kind of more of the reality, not this paralyzing, painful story that you should have known. You could have prevented it. That's just that brain trauma shame response that's trying to keep you protected. It's saying that story to you out of fear of, oh my God, I gotta keep her out of this. And so what if I just tell her that it's her fault? If she'd known, if she'd done better, if she'd been better, none of this would have happened. But the way that you kind of reconcile this shame is know that it's happening, right? And you're doing that. You're hearing that story in your head. And then you really kind of have to reality check it, because shame and trauma aren't in the rational part of your brain. This is where you reality check, right? I said there's no calendar and there's no like, this is who Kristin's supposed to be in life and this is who I want to show up. That's where this is in your executive functioning. So you need to reality check that. How could I have known? Really? And then sometimes there's some truths in there that you can learn from it, where you can be empowered. Like, again, it's, God, I didn't even know that there was such thing as sex and porn addiction. Now that I know what it looks like, now that I know what my husband would say, oh, I didn't even know about gaslighting. Now I know I did have instincts, and I would come up to him and I would say, what is going on? Why are you pulling away from me? You seem to be so quick to anger. I was picking up that like things weren't good, but then he just gaslight me by saying, God, you're so sensitive, or, you know, maybe if you'd stop nagging me, I wouldn't push you away, or wow, you seem really secretive with the computer. So the process of understanding, of building a shame resiliency practice, which is recognizing you're in shame, right? The story that you're telling yourself, contextually, critically, where it came from, right? What happened? Is it true? Is it not? Where did I get this story from? Is it productive or not? How is it making me feel? And then there's this other process, because you know me, I'm all about groups, right, Tami? It's reaching out to other people, just like you're doing it right now. You're saying this out loud. We're talking about it. And hopefully it's turning this on, and you're kind of putting it through a more realistic litmus test, a more accurate tester of what we're talking about here, right? Because I hope you understand, the shame and trauma aren't necessarily accurate. They're just made to be wide swaths of like, this looks bad, this looks dangerous, you look bad, you look dangerous. And then you're supposed to be putting it through a more critical contextual filter system. So that is you recognize that it's happening, you reality check it, and kind of, where did this come from? What's right, what's not right? Reach out to others and talk about it. Hopefully there are people who can sit with it, not judge you or not judge the situation, or just say, well, that doesn't make sense. How would you know? You know, you were 18. You're just doing what you had role modeled to you. Like, you didn't know about gaslighting until now. And then once you learn gaslighting, you actually are quite phenomenal about identifying how it shows up. And then just kind of talk about the shame, what it feels like, where you feel it in your body, the story of empowerment around it, right? So I didn't know it then. I do know it now. Now that I know better, these are the boundaries I've set, etc. And because I hope if you watched my previous webinars, there seems to be this underlying theme across the board that whatever happens to you, shame, trauma, hurt, physical pain, relationship pain, the ways to transcend out of it healthily are very similar, which is you have to be able to identify that it's happening. You know, no more living in denial, no more minimizing it, no more saying, you know, there's children starving in Africa. You have your own life and your own pain, and it must be acknowledged and validated. Then find yourself a group or a therapist or somebody who can help you validate it, right? You don't need an award or anything, but just, I hear you, that sounds very painful. You know, you were doing your best, giving you contextual understanding, and then creating some kind of story of empowerment around it or after it. So now that I know better, I'm going to do better. I didn't know then, but I know now. I learned this, I learned that. I have these deep connections with other people. I now have a capacity. I used to be so judgmental because I didn't realize this level of pain, and now I don't judge, and that's expanded my capacity for connection with other people, whatever. But that's generally the process through it.
Yeah, I mean, I talk to partners all the time who do the, you know, like the shame of, you know, how did I not know? And I'm like, when you said I do, you did not know, like you said I do to a partner that you thought was trustworthy, had your back, was, and you did not know that in year whatever you were going to have D-Day and that you were going to find out all of these things. There's no owner's manual that tells you how to do all of that. So I agree with Kristen that it's about understanding and identifying and moving forward, but not shaming about, oh, I should have known. No. And Dr. Rob's codependence is, you love someone who's got some brokenness. You love someone but you have the capacity to love that person. You see the good, too. So, it isn't all black and white, he's all bad. And he's got some problems and brokenness and some behaviors that are highly problematic and hurtful. Absolutely. But you still have the capacity to, care about this person. And that doesn't make you pathologized, like it isn't about your inability to see all the red flags, it's so I love what Kristen shared about, finding the connection and support to move forward. But, I'm so glad you're here asking those questions too. Next question. Married for 12 years. I found out my husband's sex addiction 11 years ago. He goes in and out of active addiction. He can't seem to get into recovery. I do groups almost every day, have a CSAT working with myself constantly. My husband goes off to one 12-step a week and sees a CSAT on and off. So my question is, I have shame and fear about being divorced. I'm just noticing that it is stopping me from getting a hard boundary, that I will not work on my marriage if my husband does not take his recovery seriously. How do I get past that? Because I feel like I'm going to have a nervous breakdown if I don't set that boundary soon. Thank you for the hard work you guys do. So
you are already doing it because you already are identifying that it exists. And that's a tough sentence to say, that my shame and fear and judgment around being divorced or whatever that means to you is stopping you from your self-care, is stopping you from putting yourself in a safe situation, from asserting, I am good enough to ask for these things to be met. And it is okay for me to be angry or want to move away from you or have space from someone who continues to say, I nod to your face and say, I'm going to do better and try better. And then I go out and end up just doing whatever I feel like. Even though I've had, again, the tools, the awareness, the opportunities to make the changes. And of course, that's his own stuff. But nonetheless, because our brain is wired to say, oh no, I could assert some power over this. I could change this. I can love him in a way that would make him stop doing this, etc. You need to work with that CSAT, but it sounds like you already are, to really write down, how do I want to be perceived? What does it mean if I'm divorced? What does it mean, right? It's if I ask for his needs to be met, or if I ask, hey, I need you to do this, or I'm going to have to ask you to leave, then I'm going to have that worst fear in my head reinforce that he doesn't love me, right? I mean, because the truth is that he's just in his own darkness and his own inability to see the light from the day, but we will write that story as it's our fault or it's evidence that we weren't enough. But nonetheless, we have to go there first. We have to speak it. We have to say it. We have to, talk it out with our therapist. Often it'll come from other fears and evidence of our history of not feeling enough. I did a webinar a while back too about how shame does get in the way of us setting boundaries. That fear of if I assert myself, if I say what I need, if I am vulnerable and authentic and show up really, then the next thing you're going to say is like, oh, no, I see you and I know what you need and want, and I don't want it. And so then that's going to just be complete, irrefutable evidence, according to our trauma brains, that we are unlovable. But you need to seek out evidence otherwise. I am guessing that you have, through all your recovery work, you've met some really great other people, your CSAT, your groups of people that will remind you this particular man may not do what he needs to keep you safe and to validate and respect who you are and what you need. But there's probably a lot of other people out there that strongly value you. It's painful. That's why we don't want to go there, because it's just like getting stabbed. Like I said, we'd probably choose the stab or the broken arm over this path because it's that painful. But you can see nervous breakdown, your body is keeping the score. There is a toll. There are physical consequences if you don't work through this and push through the pain. I think someone or her, she just adds push through or work through the pain. I mean, that's just semantics. It's however you understand it. But what I'm trying to say is it has to be acknowledged. Just because we feel pain and discomfort doesn't mean we move away from it entirely. We kind of have a full understanding. Like I always use the metaphor when we experience pain, our knee-jerk reaction. So like if we touch a hot pot and we burn ourselves, that pain is teaching us something, right? And I think we initially pull our hand away and say, oh, I'm never going to touch that hot pot again. It burned me. But really, when you pull your executive functioning, you turn it on, you go, well, no, you still need that hot pot. You got to cook and you need to do it better. You need, it's telling you need to not touch a hot pot with a bare hand. You need to bring in these tools and help you with this process. So push through or work through whatever, but pain, we usually want to kick it out and say, get away from me. I'm just going to avoid it at all costs. But I'm saying you need to kind of sit in, Glennon Doyle always says, pain's a professor. When it comes knocking at your door, you need to like invite it in and start asking it questions and figuring out what it's trying to tell you. So.
Okay. My partner is so full of shame that even the slightest conversation regarding it sends him into anger. This prevents him from beginning recovery because his reaction when discussing any issues is strong denial. Any advice on how to talk about it without making him feel defensive?
I want to know, is he in a 12-step group of other addicts? Because 12-step meetings and recovery work is all about shame resiliency. Not all about, but partially about it. Because what are they doing? Every day they're showing up to a bunch of people who've blown it and screwed up and lied and manipulated in the same way they have. And they're sharing their stories. And they're having people, they're taking their numbers, they're hanging out with them, they're having talks with them, and they're learning, oh, I can share what I've done, how I've blown it, how I've screwed up, and they can still want to hang out with me. They can still be friends with me. And that's all a shame resiliency practice. So I wonder if your partner, sorry, you didn't say man or woman. So I wonder if your partner is practicing those shame resiliency things outside of your relationship. That would be helpful because kind of a precursor and like a muscle builder for your shame resiliency practice. Advice on how to talk about it without it making him feel defensive. My number one defensive thing is to just always say, when I mention this to you, I see you shut down or I see you get really angry. How can I help share this thought or feeling without you being angry? Or what's the story that you have going on in your head? Well, the story I tell you is that I can't do anything right. I'm never going to do. No, that's not there. There's many things that you've done right. This particular thing really hurt me. So how can I give you feedback on what really hurts me so that you can do better without you just kind of generally taking it on as like evidence of how terrible I am? So I get really specific. It's like, what's the story you're telling yourself about it? What I just said, what did you hear me say? This is what I'm, when you do X, Y, and Z, this is what I hear. A lot of it's role modeling. And then I always come from a curious place. Curiosity, remember, keeps you in that executive functioning. Help me understand why you're so angry. What did you hear me say? And that brings it up to the conscious surface.
Okay, next question. As a recent graduate from our treatment program, Seeking Integrity, I discovered that bullying from my brother had a significant impact on my adult life. I am learning to try and repair the damage with my betrayed partner. But one of the facts I learned, pointed out by Dr. Rob, was I never had a chance due to the extreme bullying by a brother he identified as a sociopath. So I am in the quandary of spending a huge amount of effort to repair the damage I have done to my partner, but I don't know how to repair or address the damage done to me as a little boy and not blaming all my past trauma on today's poor decisions.
Right. This is a common kind of dynamic that we find, right? The lying or hurtful behavior or manipulative behavior doesn't usually start like just with your married partner. It'll have been learned or role modeled or experienced elsewhere at another time. So it's a delicate process of almost when we're healing with our betrayed partner, right? Our most immediate, upfront, primary relationship. That's triaging, right? That's kind of at the core. It's like stopping the hurtful behavior, but then also trying to work to repair the relationship with my betrayed partner. You know, trying to say what I mean what I say. But then there's also underneath that is healing, you know, the wounded child, the trauma that I'd experienced, all those shame voices, all the trauma that I was talking about. Those things come with time, and they can sometimes come as you're healing with your partner. Because I'm telling you, most of the betrayed partners want to know you have a full contextual understanding of why you did what you did, and how you're going to work to never do that again. And that's essentially the process to healing your shame and trauma, right? Identify exactly what happened, what triggered the shame, what triggered the trauma, and where it came from, and the story of empowerment that you're going to have from now on. So what I'm trying to get across to you is the process for you healing your shame and your trauma is very, very similar to the process of you trying to heal the wounds and the betrayal with you and your partner. Because he or she just wants to know, you know what caused it, you know the tools to prevent it, you know how to talk about it freely and openly, because then I can start feeling safer and understand that this is a new person. It's not the same one that's going to hurt me or lie to me or relapse, etc. And it can happen kind of at the same time. But of course, once the dust settles, I always encourage everyone to do some trauma therapy. Like I've said in other webinars, EMDR, IFS, internal family systems, go back and really go into these past situations and kind of clear them out, kind of excavate them, so to speak. I also, on KristinSnowden.com, I always have live small work groups where we do work more on this topic of uncovering your shame and uncovering trauma. I have betrayed partners groups and a lot of helpful resources on KristinSnowden.com. And then I also, on my YouTube channel, if you subscribe or join mailing lists to the KristinSnowden.com or my YouTube channel, Kristin Snowden, there's a lot of free accessible resources there as well.
So I hope you join it, and I put in the chat, KristinSnowden.com is where that worksheet is. KRISTIN Snowden SNOWDEN.com. You'll find it there. So okay. So thank you again, Kristin. We'll see you next month. So she's the second Wednesday of the month. Next week will be Eddie Caparucci. And then Troy Love is attachment wounds. So, okay. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thank
Bye-bye.
you for joining. I'll see you next month.